Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. The afterglow, the aftermath, picking up the wreckage, whatever it is when it comes to a Ryder Cup, whoever wins, there's a lot to unpack. And there's probably nobody that I could ask to have this conversation with that I would appreciate their perspective more than the guy who's going to join me. He captained the European side back in 2014, and he is now an essential voice in the game, covering it, Sky Sports over in Europe, and of course on on Golf Channel. It's Paul McGinley. And Paul's perspective on all this stuff, and primarily, he's not going to speculate so much on what is wrong with the United States, but he will talk as much as he will. Like, he won't give away all of the most important secrets, but his perspective on what happened in Rome and why Europe is it's coming up right now.
I think this is only a grip.
It's only my sole connection to this.
It's only in my hands on every single shot.
It's an extra 2 yards of carry when it matters most.
Yeah, only a grip.
Mine are only golf pride.
Respect the grip.
And with that, we welcome in the 2014 European Ryder Cup captain, Paul McGinley. Paul, my friend, how are you?
I'm good, Gary. Thank you. Good. I'm down in Portugal having a few days break after 4 weeks in a row doing TV. So, emotionally, I'm a bit out of gas, but that's all right.
Listen, you're awfully kind to indulge me to give me this time. I know how much our audience is going to appreciate your perspective a couple days removed from all of this. But Paul, I want to go back to August 1 of 22, which was the day that Luke Donald was appointed the captain. The circumstances surrounding that were unorthodox. It was different because of what had transpired in the immediate aftermath of Henrik making the decision to go to LIV. That process, how different was that from what is normally the regular process for the deciding of who is going to be the captain?
What we've done in Europe over the years is that we have evolved it into the three most recent captains, as well as a representative of the Players Committee, as well as Keith Pelly being a five-man committee that makes that decision. So for the decision in Henrik, those three most recent captains were Padraig, Thomas, and Darren, along with, I think it was David Howell from the Players Committee and Keith Pelly. And they made the choice that Henrik would be the captain. As you know, that went down the road for a couple of months, and then Henrik went to LIV, and he no longer was able to be captain. And so what happened then was we were in a little bit of a flux as to where we were going to go from there. And the view then was that we needed to do a resitting of this committee. But one of the things that was happening at the time was the possibility of bringing back an ex-captain. And Thomas Bjorns was a person whose name was thrown around as, the most recent home captain. And rather than have him compromised in any way, he was asked to be excused from that committee because his name would be part of the discussion. He wasn't pushing himself to be so, but just in terms of transparency, it was better that we had a conversation about an ex-captain without him being part of it. So they asked me to go back on the committee to help with the decision on Luke, and we came to the decision that, we were going to continue going forward, and it wasn't a case of going back to an old captain, and not to panic, and that we had a great opportunity to kind of, bring in somebody with a huge Ryder Cup CV and record and popular with the players and Luke. And I think it's fair to say the Luke Donald we see now is a different Luke Donald than on the 1st of August last year. I think he's evolved as a person. I think he's become more confident in the public arena in terms of speaking and interviews. He did a phenomenal job as captain. And, I think that speaks a lot to our backroom team in Ryder Cup, because we have a solid backroom team of people who work, with the, whether it be the caddy master, whether it be the physios and the doctors, whether it be Scott Crockett, who's the head of media, or somebody who looks after player liaison and, all the wishes of the players leading into it. We have a solid team in place, and then the captain just sits on top of that team. And I think it says a lot to their team that, they've molded me, they molded Thomas, they molded all of us as captains into positions to be, pretty good captains. And I think they've done the same with Luke.
You use the word, let's, panic and don't panic. I said in the immediate aftermath of Europe winning, you have to take into consideration where everything was when he was appointed. There was a lot of turbulence around the DP World Tour, around what was going to be a big transition, a big pivot, whether it was the players who were a part of all these teams, Paul, for the last 20 years, whether they had any playing days left in them or not. They were going to be part of the backbench. They were going to be a part of the intelligentsia of Team Europe going forward, starting this year. How did you know that everything was going to be as tranquil as it could have been? How long did that take for you to believe, we're in good hands?
I think, I don't think we were in that much of turmoil. I think trust the process and trust the people. As I say, this committee, this group of people who sits behind the captain is a very, very well-drilled, brilliant committee. And, once you put a captain in place there, that captain is going to be molded in what we call the European way, how they conduct themselves. And yes, the captain comes in with his ideas and, he filters those in and they come together. Like, for example, we had a change in our statistics behind the scenes. We were using a different company in previous Ryder Cups, and Luke was of the view, no, I want to use Eduardo Molinari and I want to use his statistics, and I also want to be a vice captain. And, those wishes are granted. So the captain does have a lot of say. He comes in, he gets an overall budget as well too, and how he wants to spend that budget, and he puts those things forward, and they meet regularly. And there's a lot of drilling that goes on, and I think it's fair to say, from a media point of view, there's a lot of drilling went on with Luke. Make sure his messaging was clear, make sure his communication was clear, make sure that when he got in front of the media, he didn't put himself into a position where he could have been seen to be either lying or not answering a question, and coming in with a lot of integrity and doing things the right way. Scott Crockett, I can't tell you enough praise and credit that we all have who've ever worked with him, who's our head of media behind the scenes. He does an amazing job. And, he certainly changed me as a personality. He certainly, molded me in a very positive way. I was very raw when I came in and, was a lot more polished when I finished. And I think the same can be said for Luke.
The decision to flip to foursomes to start the Friday session, you'd have to go back to 93. And for some people, it's like, well, that's ominous. The last time it was that way in Europe, the United States won. Your colleague, Brandel Chambly, early in the week went on the air and said it was a mistake. He thought that, the momentum that can be gained later in the day by having that format second could prove to be a mistake. Clearly it wasn't. But Paul, the reason I bring that up is that this is not just something that Europe is good in foursomes generally. They're outstanding over there. But the United States has been very good in foursomes in the United States. The last 4 Ryder Cups in the States, the U.S. is 21-11 in that format. And they've always led with it as well in the last 4. I think it speaks to the home course advantage and kind of all of the stuff that comes with walking on that first tee on a Friday in that funky format in an environment that is so dissimilar from what they're used to. I think it's the most significant home field advantage in all of sports, that format in that environment. What do you think about that?
It is what you make of it, Gary. We make a lot of it at home. We use it as constructively as we can to give ourselves an advantage. Whether that's setting up the golf course, whether that's analysing our players and analysing the American players, looking at strengths and weaknesses and setting up the golf course accordingly, whether it's having the Italian Open or the French Open for 3 or 4 editions before the Ryder Cup once it's announced, so the players get used to playing the golf course and getting some feedback in that regard. And then also it's about the pairings of, it's not just about putting 2 guys together because they're great friends or they might have played well in the past. It's about what's their skill sets and how are the skill sets going to be suited to the test, the difficult discipline that foursomes is. So it's a combination of all of those things. And then, of course, it's riding the wave of home support, and it's coming out of the blocks quick. What we seem to do very, very well is come out of the blocks quick, certainly playing at home. So it's a combination of all of those things, but we certainly use it to our advantage. And I think a big advantage is we know the golf course intimately. Our players know the golf course. That French Open, I've been playing there since 1992 on that French Open golf course. Every one of the players in France had a top 10 finish or better in the French Open over those years. I think with 6 or 7 of our players had played the last couple of Italian Opens around there, and we obviously had a great recce down there a few weeks ago where all 12 of our players went down there for 2 days and played it. So we were used to it, and we were ready for the golf course. The golf course was to our advantage, and it was tailored that way by the use of statistics. One of the things that was very clear, I said it on TV, and I don't want to give too much away, but we were a better team statistically in America collectively at around the 200 to 240 yard mark. America were very good with wedges in their hands. Anything from kind of 100 yards to 135, America were much better than us. So, setting up the golf course, it's not about just tailoring rough. Everything's always pinching in the fairways and that kind of thing. It's not. What we did was we took 3 par 4s and we made them drivable par 4s. 3 par 4s that were drives and wedges, which would have been strength to America. And we actually moved the tee boxes up and made them at 200, made them at 300 yards or 330 yards, and obviously that's where our strength was going to be. So that's kind of, when I talk about tailoring the golf course, they were clever ways to put the odds just a little bit in our favor, without losing the integrity of the golf course.
If you look at 2010, it's tight, it's tense. 2012, everybody knows it was incredibly tense. And then starting with your team, 5 straight blowouts. 3 by Europe, 2 by the United States, 14, 16, 18, 21, now 23. Does the Ryder Cup at large have a quandary here?
I don't think so. I think what's clear is, certainly I can speak from a European perspective, we've nailed the template at home. I use that word template, and template was something that we did, that I kind of learned all my years, and I brought it together collectively and put a bow around it and kind of did what I did. And Thomas and Luke have very much stayed within that template, and we've continued down that road. It's clearly defined, and we've done that. America are very good as well too with their template at home and how they set up the golf course. It's not just us that are clever in terms of how we set the golf course. America do the same when we go over there, and they tailor the golf course according to their strengths and away from our strengths, which is what. But I think it's fair to say from both sides, certainly from a European perspective, we have not nailed that template away from home. We have a lot of work to do. As much as we've nailed the home template, we have a lot of work to do in saying, okay, that was that. That home template does not necessarily work away from home. We got a different set of criteria we have to put in place, and there's different dynamics at play, and we're going to have to dream it up for what is an away template. So that's a challenge. I see that as a challenge, and it's going to be even more of a challenge, the fact that we're going to be in New York, which is obviously going to be a very hostile environment. But sometimes that can work to your advantage. I played in Detroit in 2004 under Bernard Langer. That was a very hostile environment, and we relished in it, and we won by a record margin. So it can be done. And we have a lot of work in Europe now to go away and dream up what the away template is.
Paul, the other day you were speaking about the culture of the European Ryder Cup team. And after your team won, I wrote some thoughts on just its dime store analysis. It's from a complete outsider, my view of why you guys are so good. And it's not as glib as they make more putts. I think it runs very, very deep. And you talked about these nations. You talked about the size of these countries. A country like Northern Ireland has the population the equivalent of the state of Idaho. Sweden, a population the state of Minnesota. And I can go on. To me, there are layers of allegiance that you guys have, and I think those are not intangible. I think they're tangible. I think that stuff is powerful. How did the culture of of Ryder Cup Europe? When did you, as the captain, what were the things you felt you needed to touch upon to make these guys feel the humility and the privilege to represent that jersey?
Well, again, it's all kind of part of our template because it's like some things that are very, very complex, Gary, whatever it may be in business or whatever. The best way of getting the answers and stuff is to distill it down to something smaller. And I had a view very clearly, and it comes from my background in Ireland. You know, in Ireland, we've got 32 counties in Ireland, like you have states in America, and they're very, very small. We've only got between north and south, we've got 6 million people total in population. And we've got 32 counties north and south. And Gaelic football in Ireland is a big, big deal, as you know, people might have watched Gaelic football and hurling. And it's an amateur sport. You get 80,000 people at the games from quarterfinals onwards, and 30, 40, 50,000 at the other games. But the big thing is you can only play for the county you're born in, right? So there's no transfers. And if you happen to be Tom Brady and you're born in, as good as Tom Brady, and you happen to be born in a county that's not very good, well, unfortunately, that's tough luck. You know, you're never going to be, the Tom Brady of Gaelic football. So I took that idea, and what I did was I wanted to put that in a European context. We're not just here representing a blue flag, and I wanted to distill it down because one thing that we're all united in, Gary, and I can speak for most people in the world, we're very, very proud of where we come from. We're very, very proud of our roots. And when you touch somebody's heart, a good way to do it is through where they're from. Most of us have got great experiences of growing up, the little town or village that we're from, the aunties, the uncles that are still living there, the friends we went to school with, the girlfriends that we used to have, all of those things, those first love and all the stuff that happened. And that bloomed out of that little town and village you're from. I wanted to bring the players back to that place in our minds. That, look, you're not, as much as we're here representing this blue flag of Europe and United, we're also individuals, and we all come from different places. And so what I spent a lot of time, and whether it be tailoring the rooms or whether it be communication with the players about representation, not of Europe as a whole, but of the town, the village, the people that you represented, who will all be tuning in and watching in the, around the pub in Ireland or watching at home, proud of you. And every time they come on, they're going to be watching you. And, it's the same, whether it be Martin Keimer. I remember having chats with Martin because captain in 14, and Germany had won the World Cup soccer that year. And, Martin is a big German fan, obviously German soccer fan, big fan of soccer. And, I said, Martin, just as you were sitting down and watching the German team during the World Cup and emotionally invested in every single kick that was going on in that final, German people are going to be doing the same when you're on TV playing in this Ryder Cup. And, out there, be representative of them and be aware. It's something about igniting the heart. I'm a really believer that when players and sports people are inspired and they're playing from the heart, they go to a higher level than if they're playing from their head or they're told to do something. When it comes certainly through their heart and they have an emotional investment in something or representation of something, magic happens. And so that's what I used. And I think Luke took it to another level, a better level in terms of doing that this year. And he made some videos, personal videos from the people that were important to each player. And he sent it to them in a video, and they all watched it privately in the rooms. And I think that really ignited a lot of them. I heard John Ram and talking about a lot of tears, when they watched that video, because it was, as much as you're there, John Ram representing, the blue flag and the DP World Tour and all that goes with it, we get that. But to really ignite, these players, I really feel you got to do it through the heart, and the best way to do it is from the people, their loved ones in particular.
You mentioned the DP World Tour. I call it layers of allegiance, whether it be the little community you're from, the country you're from, the European flag, and then the DP World Tour. And I've always thought, Paul, that however long they may have played on the DP World Tour, and maybe a modest amount of time before they make their way to the PGA Tour, and the lion's share of these guys make most of their living on the PGA Tour, but they never forget where they came from. And I think the PGA of America people, I know all those people, they have good intent, and I think they're good folks. But the PGA Tour players representing the United States on this team, they're not playing for the PGA of America and their livelihood. I know financially what this means to the lifeblood of the DP World Tour and how important it is. So I've always felt that that's a powerful thing, and the idea of using the idea that we're the underdog because we're representing something that is not the PGA Tour, and I get it. It's the PGA of America. I think there's a disconnect between the American players, and they look around at these people wearing the same uniforms. They don't really know who these people are. I think that's a challenge for them.
I think it is too, Gary, and I think, we certainly benefit from being smaller. Being smaller, it's easier to kind of connect and unify people. America is a massive country with a massive population in it. And as much as you're all very proud to be Americans, as I say, it's that engagement of the heart. We seem to be better at doing that. I don't want to give too many secrets away as to how America go about it, but it's something that we feel is very, very important. And I get that. And we do take advantage of that, and we are aware of that. It's a lot harder to unify, a country as vast and as big as America than it would be, Europe, particularly when we all come from such diverse backgrounds.
Paul, I was having a conversation last night with Michael Bamberger, the writer, and I told Michael, I said, Michael, I don't know what projects you have on the horizon, but a book needs to be written about the European Ryder Cup team. I personally think, Paul, I've covered all sports in my career, and I study these great cultures, franchises, programs, whether it be college, like Duke basketball, they call it the brotherhood, and you're there whether it's for a year or 4 years or whatever. You're always representing it. I think the European Ryder Cup team is one of the great teams that we've seen in global sports in the last 40 years. I know you agree with that, but how did the European Ryder Cup team become one of the great teams in global sport?
I think we've been blessed with great people carrying on the mantle and establishing a culture within the team and a code of behavior within the team. I'm not talking about captains here. I'm talking about players. So you look at the handover of the top players. The top players are so important in a Ryder Cup team, Gary, not just in terms of the haul of points that you need from their top players, but they set the culture of a team. Because when I come into my first Ryder Cup environment in 2002, I wasn't coming in on a lot of form because 9/11 happened the year before. I'd gone from 6th in the money list to 35th in the money list. I wasn't having a great year. I was worried going into this Ryder Cup, and it was like, how am I going to get through this huge, big event, not on my game, and slipping 30 places down the order of merit, and with a few players off form like everybody does over a 12-month period. And when I walked into that team environment, I walked into a culture. I walked into a culture and a code of behavior and an excitement and a sense of fun, a sense of adventure that oozed out of the top players. I'm talking about Sergio. I'm talking about Lee Westwood. I'm talking about Olazabal. I'm talking about Bernard Langer. I'm talking about Ian Woosnam. Those were the top players of that team in 2002, Colin Montgomery. And you sat into my first meeting and I looked around and they were so buoyed, so excited, and they had not an aggressive determination, but a sense of adventure and relishing of the challenge that was ahead. And it takes my mood as a rookie going in a little bit worried to raises it up, and then you get in the golf course. And then the banter starts, you have a bit of crack and you have a bit of fun, and you kind of lose yourself and you kind of forget, oh, by the way, I was playing rubbish the last few weeks. Now my game's in pretty good shape. Your mood changes. So that culture, that's just one example. But then that moves, then those moves. I mean, you look at what we've happened here this time, So those people, Bernard Langer, Ian Woosnam move away, and then other players come, the Westwoods and the Garcias come to the front, and the Darren Clarks come to the front. And, now they're starting to, carry on that legacy and that culture. And culture is a code of behavior and it's an environment within the team. And then you move on. The Rory McIlroys, the John Rahms, and the Victor Hovlands have talked a lot about this week that one of the advantages this week that they didn't appreciate was the fact that because those live players were not there, those big characters that had carried a mantle, and because they weren't there, it kind of forced them to step up and be those soldiers and be those people that are establishing the culture. And they seem to relish it. So it's kind of handed down through the top players in particular, because culture does not start from the bottom players up. It starts from the top players down. And the captain has to oversee that and coordinate that and embellish it. I think that's what we're blessed with. Now, let's not get too carried away here. You're giving us great credit here, Gary. We're coming off a record loss in Whistling Straits 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right? So as I say, we have a lot to do in terms of being as good an environment and team away from home. Yes, we won the Miracle in Medina, but remember, we're on our knees at one stage.
No question.
We're heading for a record loss at one stage in Medina. So we have a lot to do still, and we have a lot. We can't get I like to use the word giddy. We can't get too giddy over here about how great we are. But there's no doubt we're now going to be 34 years in a row without losing at home. I mean, that is a serious record when you think of the quality of the American players that have come and tried to win here. Yeah,
I'm not omitting, some of these blowouts, but you're 10-4 since 93. You've won 7 straight in Europe. You're 8-3 in this century. You've won 3 times on American soil since the United States won last in Europe. I look at the world ranking of these teams. I find that to be highly overrated when it comes to trying to assess. And I've seen this stat trotted out, the aggregate average world ranking of the American team, the European team. How many times do we have to see the result to know that that's a totally inflated stat when it comes to trying to assess who's going to be good and who's not? But it's a metric. It's a baseline to look at. The United States has had great talent for the last 30 years. And yet you've thrown more haymakers and landed far more the United States. And oh, by the way, Paul, it also was during a time where the 2 greatest players of this generation were representing the United States in most, if not all of these. And you can say, well, that dynamic was kind of undermined the United States. I think there may be some truth to it. The truth is that Mickelson and Woods were on a lot of these teams, and they didn't win, Paul. That's why I think you guys are one of the best teams that I've seen in my lifetime. I want to read you something. My intuition tells me you've read the book Legacy by James Kerr.
Yeah.
Of course you have. There's a line on page 78. The strength of the wolf is the pack. That's who you guys are. And I say that because I think that vulnerability, I think what it does is create trust. I think you guys make yourself and you're willing to be vulnerable to each other. These little videos, getting emotional, exposing like who you are deep down. Not an easy thing to do. I actually think it's a sign of great strength in the individual to be willing to do that. I think those types of things, Paul, embolden your team. Because when you look around and you look at someone like John Rahm and he's weeping, looking at a 90-second video of people who are the most important people in his life talking about him, and these guys see that, I think that's a very powerful thing.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. We are very good at that, about touching the heart. As I say, you touch the heart, magic happens. And you take away pressure as well too. You take away pressure when they're doing it on their own terms and stuff that's really, really important to them. And I think Luke did a wonderful job of really touching the heart and inspiring. Touching the heart is inspiration, and inspiration is something that is pressure free. When you're inspired to do something, it's pressure free. There's not a heavy weight of expectation and burden on top of you. It's a sense of adventure. And I think we do a really good job of creating that. I really do. I've certainly always felt that with Ryder Cups. It's not, oh my God, we have to win. It's the opposite. It's like, okay, here we go, another adventure. Strap yourself in. This is going to be fun, and this is going to bob and weave. And it's going to be 100 mile an hour, but it's going to be fun. And I think we do a good job of that. And as I say, go back to Luke. I think he did a great job in elevating so much of what we've done before, but he didn't stray outside what's been successful.
The Luke candidacy for 25, I get it. You get caught up in the haze of victory, and it's powerful stuff. And he did a fabulous job in every department. What he said at the opening ceremony, I mean, that's the eloquence, all of that, very impressive. What is the process, since he's already been the captain, and knowing that this is such a career appointment, and let's say there is a re-entry of all those live guys. I mean, they're lined up like G5s on a tarmac to captain your side. How plausible is it that Luke will represent at Bethpage as the captain?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of that. I don't think we're going to do anything immediately. I don't even know if we are going to use the same process we did before with the three most recent captains. That's up for discussion. The Players Committee will make that decision. There's about 15 people on that Players Committee. David Howell is the chairman of that. They will convene now in the next month, and there'll be a debrief as to what went on. There'll be a broad discussion as to how are we going to go about naming the next captain, and then we'll slowly kind of gather information together and whatever that process may be, we'll put that in place and decide where we want to go. Our live guy is going to be part of the conversation or not. Again, we probably won't know that till they say 31st of December before some outcome is delivered. And now they're talking about maybe that being extended for a few more months. I don't know. Can we wait that long to know whether they're in or out? Probably not. So we'll have to just wait and see. There's so much to happen in the next few months. But I'll say it again. We've nailed this template at home. We're doing great at home. But we were devoid of a lot of things when we played away, and we're going to have to look at that and how we go about things playing away from home.
The whole live component. Look, Yasser. The cleansing is already well underway, and he's playing at the Dunhill with Martin Slumbers. That executed by Johan Rupert. You get a smile on your face. My gut tells me that there is going to be re-entry. The American side, obviously, Brooks Koepka was on the team, but we're talking about, you mentioned some of these names. We're not talking about Lee Westwood playing. We're talking about him being there and being part of the team again in some capacity. Garcia, McDowell, Casey, Stenson, Poulter. That is heady. That's a heady group of guys with a lot of experience, a lot of success. Does your gut tell you they're going to be involved?
My gut is saying probably not, to be honest. But I'm not going to rule anything out. It's not for me to decide. It's for the current players who will have a big input on that. The players who stayed loyal to the tour, will make that decision, not me. So there's a long way to get to in terms of negotiation for them to be, part of the conversation. I think it's fair to say that that's not going out on a limb in any way. I think all doors are open. I'm certainly not closed any doors. But a lot of things were said, and a lot of disrespect to the DP World Tour was said publicly. And that's not forgotten. But look, we've come a long way, as you say. 6 months ago, I'd have said probably no chance. Now I'm saying, of course, there's a chance. The doors are open, but there's a lot of discussion to go on, and I won't be front and center of those discussions. The John Rahms, the Rory McIlroys, the Victor Hovlands, in particular, will have a big say on that. The big players in the team will have a big say, and along with the Players Committee, they will collectively come up with a yay or nay decision, and from there, we can move forward. But it's at the moment we can't make a decision on that until there's clarity in terms of where this deal is going to end up.
Rory, he said on Sunday night he thought it benefited them that they weren't there, and he was not being disrespectful. His point was it forced him and Rahm and Hovland to take positions that they wouldn't have otherwise. And it's not like Rory's bashful. He was already absolutely one of the leaders of the team. He has a big presence. But I want to ask you about his performance, because back in May at the PGA Championship, Paul, I asked him, can ruthless Rory still exist? And the example I gave was the PGA when he won at Valhalla. He all out punted Ricky and Phil off that 18th hole, like, get the hell out of the way. I'm closing this deal. And I'm not suggesting he's been timid in the decade since. And his answer was, that's exhausting to be that way. And I don't think I need to be that way to win golf tournaments. I thought he was pretty damn ruthless this past week. And he certainly was, Paul, on Sunday. He had an earnestness about him like, I'll be damned. I don't care if it's Sam Burns. I don't care if it's, I don't care if it's Lanny Watkins. Put anybody out there, I'm going to drub your ass. I thought ruthless Rory came to play this week.
I think that's very, very insightful, Gary. There's not one word of what you just said I would disagree with. Rory's heart's on fire. He's a different animal. And it certainly was on fire this week. Well, what happened on Saturday, he really felt aggrieved about what happened. And he came out with a focus about him on Sunday. I mean, he was 6 under par. He played some of the best golf of anybody on Sunday, He just didn't win his game. I mean, he played sensational golf. But he had a look about him, he had an aura about him, and it wasn't just this crazy, emotion-filled stuff that we saw the night before in the car park. This was a genuine sense of purpose and focus about him. And I've no doubt that, what happened the night before drove him to that place. And I think that's when Rory plays his best. It's because he's such an inspirational player. And when that heart of his is on fire, he goes to a new place. And I think we saw that last week. That was his best ever Ryder Cup. It's no coincidence. I think Luke did a wonderful job of having him emotionally engaged all week long. And maybe, his point is, with those big personalities not in the picture, it kind of forced him into more of a leadership role, which he was happy to do. But it's not a leadership role as in, come on, guys, stand on the table. Here I come. This is what I'm going to do, all full of emotion. You can lead in a lot of ways, and leading by example is the best way to do it. Because that's what I learned from the Monties. It's not that Monty spoke. Excuse me, Monty or Elazabal or any of those guys spoke more passionately than anybody else in team meetings. Far from it. They just led by example, and they led by aura, and they led by body language. And, that's what you want from your top players. I mean, who wouldn't want to just look around the room and you see John Rahm sitting in the corner? I mean, talk about an imposing figure. And then you put his golf game and you put his attitude on top of it. That's a pretty formidable package that John Rahm has got there. And you go, boy, I'm glad he's sitting in our corner. I'm glad he's sitting here with blue on him rather than red. I'd agree with all you say. I think Rory was very, very emotionally invested. And I think there is certainly a strong reason that why he played so well was because he was so emotionally invested.
Is that type of stuff transferable when you're out there alone? Augusta National next April, I think it's the widest Rubicon any player has had to try to cross. With all due respect to Gene Sarazen in 1935, I thought that Brandel years ago, the best line I've heard about Sarazen winning the Masters in 35, he said that was akin to winning the Hero World Challenge, which... it was. It was 1930. It was a gathering of friends, and Jones was playing. And what Rory's trying to do there is such a significant achievement that there's so much beyond the physical part of going out and the executing of it and the run-up of it. Obviously, he's got the makeup to do it, but can a week like this, is there residual that it come next April, if let's say he completes the career Grand Slam, that it wouldn't surprise you if he pointed to a weekend in late September in Rome that could have been a part of all of it?
Well, that's up to Rory and Rory's team, and to sit down and analyze. And he's very good at doing this, analyzing, and maybe he's learned something about himself this week. And he's learned something, that, when his heart is emotionally on fire, like you've just seen, that, hey, maybe I need to do that, man. You know what I mean? Put one and one together and go, okay, well, actually, I said that, but actually the opposite is true. Validation is a great thing. The ability for all sports people to sit down and analyze on the end of a performance, good, bad, or indifferently, and use it as a learning to say, okay, well, actually, you know what? I thought something different, but this week I felt that way, and I'm going to do more of what I did this week because, it worked. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll wait and see, but certainly he was a different animal this week because I don't think he played his best, Gary. I don't think he's on his game. I don't think
I didn't think Friday he played particularly well.
No, but he got jobs done.
Yes.
And I mean, just think how he closed games as well. Some of those tee shots into 17 to close out games. Now that's a par 3 over 200 yards, and it's a very, very narrow, skinny green with a massive roll off on the left-hand side, heavy rough on the right, and a green that's tilted right to left. So it's not like it's a massive target to hit at, and every time he had a bit between his teeth coming up to that 17, he delivered. I think he's, he was able to pull off the shots in the heat of battle. That's the key to in anything. That's the key to anything. He does it in regular tour events, and look at his record in tour events. And when he gets a sniff of winning the FedEx, how he's able to close the deal in those. So it's transferring that into the big moments in major championships. The
incident on Saturday night, you guys were live on the air. I thought, you and Rich and Brandel, the whole team had a great week. But you're reacting in real time to a camera, sitting there, capturing these images in a parking lot. And you're like, I love it. I love it. Now, you're a footballer, so I'm not surprised. And look, I loved it too. But the incident itself, I thought Joe had temporary insanity. I just think it was almost like it was an out-of-body experience. And I got to believe there's got to be a lot of regret on his part. But when stuff like that happens, you get beyond that moment. Is that good for the event?
I think it's good for the event. I think, if sport doesn't have passion, whether you're a player or whether you're a supporter, and you don't have those two words again, emotional investment in the team or the player, that's when sport is electric. And, in our debrief after Whistling Straits, and we had a lot of headwinds in Whistling Straits, it was on the back of COVID. We had no practice rounds up there. We had an aging team. We had a team out of form. We had no European fans allowed travel. There was a lot of things were against us. But one of the things that came out very clear, and one of the things that, certainly spoken a lot with Luke in the last 2 years, and my input very strongly, was this sense of engagement, that we didn't look like a team ready for the fight. We were a team that was kind of laying down quickly. And the might of America, just like an avalanche, came at us, and we just kind of, we got suffocated by them. The reason we lost by a record margin in Whistling Straits was not because because America had the best team ever out and, we had no chance. The scoring against par doesn't indicate that, Gary. The scoring was quite moderate against par that America had to do to knock us into a record loss. Doing the debrief and the scoring afterwards, I think we averaged about 4 or 5 under in 4-ball matches. We averaged 2 under in the singles, and we averaged just under even par in the foursomes. Now, on a golf course in 2019 that Jason Day scored the lowest ever record score to win a major championship, and a golf course that was set up by Steve Stricker and the Americans, we talk about home advantage,
yes,
to really suit them. And that was take away all the rough, and make the green, make the golf course a birdie fest, which suits America more. Our scoring against par was very, very moderate. So one of the things that we came away and we talked about and things we had to fix was, where was the emotion? Where was the fight? Why, was it just the headwinds that make us kind of lifeless in terms of, it was only when Shane Lowry showed a bit of a battle on the second day that we kind of looked like we'd something about us. It was one of the things that Luke took on side very much, and where the videos came from. And, a lot of the stuff that he did was about igniting the fire back in our team again. And you never know if it's going to work, because the worry always is, well, all these guys live in Palm Beach now, they're best friends, they play in the PGA Tour full time. Can we recreate that passion that Seve had, that I had, that Monty had, that Darren Clark had, that Wester and Poulter had? Can we ignite that in the modern player? because the modern player lives in America. Many of them are married to American women, and their families are brought up there, and they're friends with the PGA Tour guys, unlike we were, where we played very much Europe and America played America. So we worried about all that. So Luke went a lot of, and this is a lot, to his eternal credit, he obviously did a lot of work behind the scenes, but you still don't know leading into the Ryder Cup, is this, has he done it? Can we light the fire again emotionally? And I'm sitting on the set live with Brandel and Rich, and this video comes to us. It comes in our ears straight away. Hey guys, this just happened. React to this quickly. And I didn't know what was coming. And when I saw Rory coming out of that car with that on fire like that, I thought, hallelujah. Well done, Luke. Well done, Luke. That's how I honestly thought. That fire, that showed me, that was evidence and validation that Luke nailed it, getting them emotionally wired up. And, that was great to see. And I think that augurs well for us going forward in a Ryder Cup. That yes, these modern guys, they might be living in America and, all the things you do in America and friends with the American team, but that passion is still there. And we're able to ignite it again. So I think, again, huge credit to Luke on that.
Yeah, I look, this is the human condition. And it's also important to say, gosh, I wish that didn't happen, but I'm glad it did happen. I think that friction is the essence of competition. You get chippy when you're trying to get an advantage, whether it's a physical advantage at the line of scrimmage in a football game or whatever it may be. Chippiness and tension and friction. It's why we lean forward in seats and watch these competitions. I loved it myself. A couple more things before I let you go. Do you think the United States will play the Tiger card? He's got the first right of refusal for captaincies going forward. Do you think they play that card at Bethpage?
I think a lot will depend, a bit like we're waiting on see to where this deal goes with in terms of, are the live guys going to be part of the next conversation? I think Tiger is front and center of that and is distracted with that at the moment. Wants to get to the end of the road with that and decide, is there going to be a deal with the Saudis or not? And I think until that's concluded, he probably won't commit one way or the other. So if that's concluded by the 31st of December, like they say it will, well, then we'll know early in January whether Tiger wants to now move on and be part of it. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. There's no doubt he will be a captain in time, but I know that he's distracted at the moment with being front and center of all the negotiations going on behind the scenes. And so, yeah, we'll have to wait. But just going back to just before finishing that point,
yes,
that you're talking there, I didn't finish on the American team
yes,
in Italy. And, when I saw Joey and I saw Cantlay and I saw the unitedness of the American team on that Sunday afternoon, coming down the last few holes when all the crowd were giving them stick with the hats off and all that, and I saw how they performed and I saw the emotion. That was the first time I saw America emotionally invested all week. They were quiet the first day. There was not a lot of fire and brimstone about them, but it certainly came out on Sunday afternoon. And that's as I say, I think both teams can learn from that. That passion is absolutely crucial to the performance of any team.
It's interesting. As he's doing what he did on 16, 17, and then 18, they got something, like you said. They saw their own blood. They threw a punch back. They win the session. Yeah. They do it in dramatic fashion. Paul, I thought it was immediately flipped because of the incident. Because then Europe goes back to the hotel and they got a bug up their ass because of what had just happened. It was almost like we had it and then we lost it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, we still have the same point advantage. We're 5 points ahead after the first day. We're still 5 points ahead after the second day. So we're still in a great position, but we had lost some momentum. But I think, again, going back, I know what would have went on there. They would have went back to the team room and Luke would have been a little bit worried that, if motion overspills, it affects performance. When everything you do as a captain, Gary, everything you do is driven towards performance. And, we would have been too revved up in the car terms. And, that meeting, I would say, on the Saturday night was to take the revs back down again and bring it to a place where there's going to be focused concentration the following morning. And I think, I looked a lot at body language on the Sunday morning. I looked at a lot of body language. I was commentating at the time for Sky, and I was more concerned with body language than anything else. Were we going to come out over revved and too emotional, and that was going to affect our performance? Or, did the team meeting the previous night and Luke and his backroom team take them down to a proper place of focus? And I could tell by the first 2 or 3 games we're in business here. Even Tyrrell Hatton was not losing the head, and that that told me that there was a good sense of focus. And we won 4 points out of the first 6. And at that stage, then it's done. I know there was a bit of a lull then before we closed the deal. But we'd broken the back of it at that stage.
The whiff of compensation, it's not new. You can go back to the late 90s, obviously O'Meara, Duval. Do you think compensation will be a part of this story, at least on the American side, by 2025? And do you think the Europeans will absolutely pass on the idea of getting paid?
I think both teams will have. There's a lot to be negotiated out in the next 6 months, Gary, on both sides. And it would be unfair if the American team were going to be paid and we were not.
Absolutely.
So I think there needs to be a proper place found, negotiations with all 24 players and organizations involved, that everybody's going to be happy. Whether that's collectively not being paid, whether that's collectively all being paid, or whether that's a bit of both, and a nominal fee for everybody, or whatever the case may be. I don't know, but Seth Waugh and Guy Kinnings in particular, the heads of both organizations, have a lot of work to do in the next 6 months we need to get to a common ground in all of this, because you can't just have one team do it and get paid a lot and then the other team not. Personally, I hope it gets to a place where neither team is paid, because I think the money that top professional golfers are earning at the moment is huge on so many different levels. And many of them are, they're all set up for life no matter what. Once you make a Ryder Cup standard nowadays, you're set up for life anyway, whether it be through your pension fund or whether it be in the prize money you've earned. So, I think for one tournament every 2 years, it would be great to give back. On the European side, the DP World Tour needs the revenue from the Ryder Cup.
Yes.
So it's helping all of the guys who are coming through. And it's putting on events in the Challenge Tour. It's putting on decent prize funds in the DP World Tour, and that's really important for us. It's a lifeline for us. And on the American side, it's the 28,000 PGA pros around America, and giving money to them so that they can bring young boys and girls into the game and create the future Patrick Cantlays or future Justin Thomases or whatever. There's a huge amount of investment goes back into it. So I think both sides are honorable in terms of what they're trying to do with the revenues that come in. It's not like some rich private equity company is taking the money and running off into the sunset and giving it to their shareholders. This is money that's going back on both sides. It's going back into the game. It's going back into the ecosystem on both sides that has churned out these players in the first place. So I think for one tournament every 2 years, with all the money that's in the game at the moment and such, so crass, the amount of money that are so put to the front in the conversations around golf, I think it will be a wonderful narrative for the future of the Ryder Cup if it was not about money and it was about the 24 players being representative of, helping both ecosystems that made them who they are.
Last thing, my dad was a team athlete, and he said to me early in my life, and I didn't get it at first, but he said, Gary, collective achievement is one of life's great rewards. And he did it as an athlete early. He did it as a leader of a corporation later. You were a team athlete, and then you played this lonely existence of being a professional golfer, but then you captained this side. What stirred in you as somebody who, is still a part of this system, as objective as you are and as valuable as your voice is to the game to analyze this stuff? What stirred in you Sunday night when it was over?
A sense of, from the jaws of a record defeat 2 years ago, and everybody writing us off, and American media writing us off. This Ryder Cup is done for the next 10 years. Lots of articles that this is the best ever American team. They're going forward. Europe have got nothing. We were on the floor. And then Liv hit us, in the polar axis, where we lost a lot of our big names and big players and future captains through Liv, and then putting in a captain that then went to Liv as well too, in Henrik Stenson. We were on the floor. How are we going to come back against the might of America? And to be a whisperer in Luke's ear and part of the decision to put him in place and to see how far we came in those 2 years, Gary. and to watch Luke and his backroom team and to listen to their ideas over the 2 years evolving, and it's just been great to be part of it. I really enjoyed sitting kind of in the background, not in the front line like him and his vice captains were, but kind of sitting there in the back line, and I really enjoyed kind of being a bit part of it, and unearthing the young talent that we did, and the rookies, and this young Oberg coming through, and he looks like something special, and the high guard as well too, and to also go out to the one of the things we re-engineered in the debrief after Whistling Straits was the lack of a Seve Trophy style event, which I've certainly benefited from both as a player and in terms of captaining that twice before I elevated into Ryder Cup captaincy. And without that Seve Trophy, I would never have been a captain. And I probably wouldn't have played as well in Ryder Cups as I did without first having that, certainly in my first Ryder Cup. So we reinstigated that. We call it the Hero Cup. We put it in Abu Dhabi. I was in Florida at the time, traveled all the way from Florida over to Abu Dhabi to work with Luke and his vice captains and the young guys coming through, to meet Seth Straka for the first time, to meet the high guards for the first time, to see Shane and Tommy Fleetwood there, and all the other potential young guys. And we're stripping through everybody, which guys, Bob McIntyre, which guys could step up, to talk to the team on, on a few of the nights, and for Lazabal to be there with me, and, to be a part of that team environment again. That was a big part. That Hero Cup way back in January was a big part. And I was talking to Seth Straka at the party on Sunday night, and he was making that point that, if he hadn't had that Hero Cup, because it wasn't just getting to know his teammates and being part of a team and getting to know people like me and, Luke overseeing everything and meeting, be involved in the team. But it was also meeting what we opened up this conversation with, the backroom team of the Ryder Cup, because we had every one of those at the Hero Cup in Abu Dhabi, every single one of them. So the players knew who they all were, person to person, and then we were able to elevate that into the Ryder Cup. And then it made, I won't say seamless, but it made the transition very, very easy. We've got a guy as well, Michael Gibbons, that works with Scott Crockett behind the scenes, who's a lot of fun. Every players love him. He works part of the media. He does all the viral videos and that kind of thing, those funny videos. He's headed, does that. He's a figure of fun, but also does a very important job there in creating that sense of fun behind the scenes. So, all of those people were in Abu Dhabi. And, then you plug in the Bob McIntyre to them at the Ryder Cup. You plug in the Seth Strakas, you plug in the high guards. And, it's like, so those little things, and to be part of that and to kind of reassess everything, put structures in place, and then to watch the evolution of that under Luke's guidance has been very, very pleasurable, because as I say, we got beaten by a record margin. Let's not forget that.
I didn't mention his name. It's worth mentioning Justin Rose. At the beginning of the year, you would have thought the window was painted shut on his Ryder Cup career as a player. I think he's one of the more underrated studs in this event. I mean, he was the man of the match. I thought on your team in 2014, he made the bomb on Phil at Medina in 2012. For him to have the moments he had, there's no way in the world, Paul, that most people who cover the game, who are close to your side, would have thought at the beginning of the year, yeah, keep an eye on him. And then he wins at Pebble Beach, and he does enough, and he gets on the team. How about the moments he had?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we needed, you always need in a team, is a balance between young and old, and experience and young. Because when you have 4 rookies in the team, ideally you want 4 guys who are well down the road in terms of experience. Now, I'm not talking about John Rahm and Victor Hovland and Rory McIlroy, because those guys have got a different role to play in the team, and Tommy Fleetwood, because they're different. But you need the guys who are down the road a little bit, and we had a dearth of those, because Sergio was not going to be available, Westwood was not going to be available, Poulter was not going to be available. So we're looking around at the older guys and going, who's going to step up here? And obviously Justin was a guy that was highlighted, and we were delighted when he won in Pebble Beach. I mean, pretty much once he won in Pebble Beach, he was on the team. All he had to do was kind of just keep on playing till the end of the year and make the odd cut, and he was going to be on, because we needed those guys. And then you saw the role that he played, the schooling. And I use that word, in the best sense that it is. How he schooled Bob McIntyre in the first day and the second day was just great. And, Bob McIntyre then, because of that moves on to a singles then and goes ahead and wins a singles. And now Bob McIntyre, when he hits the road in the next Ryder Cup, should he make it, he's off and running. He's up and running. You know, he's so we probably lacked another one or two Justin Roses. You know, if a Westwood on form would have been great for us and made us an even better team, because, you know, if Liv hadn't happened, because, you know, we could have taken maybe the high guard and put him under his wing, you know, and you know, certainly I used Westwood in that role with Jamie Donaldson, and Jamie was the same, went on to be the hero by holding, winning the winning point in Glen Eagles. You know, I had Graham McDowell overlooking Victor Dubuisson for the same reason.
Absolutely.
And again, he went on and won the singles. And, you know, so a Graham would be another good example of a guy that we would love to have if he had been available. You know, he would have been sitting there with Justin as a guy who played one match each day, but his main job would have been to school one of the younger guys. So we missed that, but we covered it a bit, but we missed it.
You know how much I value the time. You're awfully kind, knowing that you're trying to get a little vacation, a little downtime to take the time to share your thoughts. I know how much everyone's going to appreciate hearing all of this. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Gary, and great stuff. I listen to your podcast. It's great. You do great. You're a brilliant journalist on top of a great guy. So keep going. Happy for you.
Paul, thank you so much. Once again, thank you to Paul McGinley for joining me. And I don't think it's hyperbolic for me to say that I think that Team Europe is one of the great teams that we've seen in sports. They come together once every 2 years. And yes, they've been blown out a couple of times. But if you look back, especially since continental Europe was added to the side in 1979, they've been better, consistently better than the United States. Playing as a team in a sport, you associate with them doing it all alone. They understand the secret sauce, and even though Paul wasn't going to give away all the secrets, you got a sense of the things that are important that they touch upon to get this team wired to perform, and that they did. So thank you to Paul. Most importantly, thank you to you for watching and listening to this Five Clubs conversation.